Hello and welcome to the History of Video Games podcast. My name is Ben and I am joined by the one and only Wes. How you doing, Wes?
I am doing great today. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm doing pretty good. Just chilling.
Yeah. That's what you gotta be doing.
Yeah. But I have been playing some games. Should I get right into it?
Yeah. Why don't you start us off?
Yeah, because I finished my Star Wars game after I said that I would last week, so I had to.
Nice, yeah. Made that promise.
Yeah. So it was Mysteries of the Sith. It's the expansion pack to Dark Forces 2, which, for those of you keeping track in the series, it was Dark Forces 1 was the first game, then 2, and now the expansion pack, and then it's going to get to the Jedi Knight series next. So that's really like the series I'm interested in. I didn't know anything about this Dark Forces series, but this is the last one. And like I mentioned, it's an expansion pack to Dark Forces 2. So it's on the same engine. It has a lot of the same powers and stuff. But it is a pretty lengthy campaign. It was like 14 missions, and the original base game, I think, had 24, 21, something like that.
Okay.
So it was more than half of the base game, which is pretty cool. And it was okay. Basically, the story is, there's not really any story. The first level, or the first like 2 or 3 levels, you play as Kyle Katarn from the first 2 games. And he's already a Jedi, he's like a master. So you just started with a bunch of the great weapons and the great force powers, and that was super fun. But then he leaves. You start to play as Mara Jade, who I guess is his apprentice. And she's basically like a level 1 Jedi again. So you lost all your powers and you lost all your weapons. And I didn't know this at the time, but when you are picking your powers, you can only pick like 2 powers per like each of the little talent trees it had, like the good side tree, the bad side tree, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know you could only pick 2. It didn't say that anywhere. So I think I just picked like kind of neutral abilities first, like not really thinking about it. And then I ended up getting like locked out of all the great abilities. So like saber throw, and there was like one where it was like a force ball throw. Like I just didn't get those. So that was a little annoying. But I did have healing, which saved me many times. But essentially then you're just doing random missions with her that don't have anything to do with anything, you know?
Okay.
That's like the majority of the game. And then at the very end, she goes and finds Kyle, who has apparently succumbed to the dark side. And then you fight him a little bit. But the final fight, it was just taking a while. Like I wasn't dying or anything. It was just taking a while. So I don't know why I did this, but I think I started to watch somebody else's playthrough of it just to see like how long it took them. And they're like, oh yeah, you can't win this fight. It just goes on forever. I was like, oh, come on. What you have to do for the final fight is put your lightsaber away because you're the good guy. And that triggers a cutscene and ends the game.
Weird. Okay. That's like such a hidden kind of thing.
I know, like, I would never think to do that. So that was kind of weird. Basically, you do that, Kyle, becomes good again, and because he can't kill you, and everything's cool, and that's the end of the game. But it was kind of annoying about the game is the last couple levels wouldn't let you use the shooting weapons at all. It was just lightsaber play. And the lightsaber play in this game is not very good. So that was a bit of a problem, especially when you're fighting things that can kill you in 1 to 2 hits. To only be able to hit them when you're close to them, when they can hit you, is a big problem.
Yeah.
So it wasn't too fun at the end. It was very grindy, lots of deaths. But I slugged it out. In general, the environments didn't get much better. There was like 1 level in basically like Dagobah, like a swamp. That was like the only outside level. So that and like one where you're on an asteroid, which is basically just brown. So yeah, I don't know. It wasn't what I was hoping for really, because I was kind of hoping for just like to pick up where you left off in the last one with Kyle and just continue being awesome with him. And I don't mind like kind of starting a new character again, but it felt like I was playing the same game twice. And the ending for this was just needlessly hard and just not very fun. So
Yeah.
it was okay, I guess. Like all in all, like I still enjoyed myself, but and some of the levels are okay. There was some of them on like smuggler kind of areas which I liked, but I don't know. There was still a lot of like boring parts too, and a lot of weird like you gained a super cool power up or weapon and then would never be able to use it again.
Huh.
Didn't enjoy that too much, but yeah, that's basically Mysteries of the Sith.
Sounds like a mysterious game. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, there was so many parts where you just don't know what to do next, and I had to look it up. Like I wasn't gonna sit there, and a lot of times it's like one of them was send an elevator up, but don't ride it up because there's a path below it, or underneath the carriage or whatever.
Right.
Stuff like that. It's just like, come on, guys, can't we just like make this a little easier? But yeah, I think I might take a little bit of a break from Star Wars because I did 3 games in a row. So
Yeah,
I'll do something else, and then I'll wait till I'm fresh and go back with Jedi Knight.
Yeah, you want to be ready for that experience because that's the one that even the first one, whether it's janky or not, those are the games that you're looking for. So
yeah, they're the ones I actually played before.
Right. Make sure you're not burned out before you jump into that.
Mm-hmm. But what have you been up to?
Well, I've been bouncing all over the place as usual, but the game that I wanted to talk about today, I recently started playing Into the Breach again, which is the second game, or at least the second big game that I know of from the developers of FTL, Subset Games. So FTL, of course, is this like strategic, roguelike, real time, but you can also pause it and you're in spaceships and all that. And this takes a lot of the design philosophy for it, but puts it in a totally different shell, which is really cool. So Into the Breach, you control a squad of 3 mechs, and you have to destroy these aliens that are attacking Earth. And basically, once you beat the game or once you lose, your character teleports back through time, and you're just endlessly trying to save different timelines from the same alien threat. So it's a nice, just like random, explain it all away sci-fi excuse for why it's roguelike that you just keep doing over and over and over again, and I really like it. But it has the same sort of achievement type thing going for it that FTL did, and also the same thing where you basically unlock different ways to play the game, and then that's what makes you want to go back and replay it. So in this, there's, I think, 12 different squads of 3 mechs, all that have different play styles, or maybe it's 10 different ones. But there's a lot, and the 3 mechs on each of these squads synergize with each other. But then there's also the ability to play as a random squad, which takes 1 from 3, puts 3 together out of any of the squads, or to make your own custom one. So you have like basically 30 options that you can put into any of these slots. So it's really crazy and cool, and there's like a reason to play it a bunch of times. The game itself is a grid, like tile-based, turn-based combat, and a lot of what the game plays off of is like moving the enemies so they either don't attack something you want them to don't hit, or if you can swing it, move it so they don't hit a building, but then they also hit one of their teammates based on the turn order kind of stuff, and a bunch of that sort of a strategy. And I've really been enjoying it because in FTL, you always had to like pause, plan out all your moves, and then like press them really fast, or at least I did, to be able to do any good at it. In this, it's just always, you have to confirm all your commands. It's kind of like XCOM in that way, so you can really take it slow if you just want to chill and strategize your way through it. And I've also it's a lot easier. Like I can actually beat this one. I am not good at FTL for whatever reason, and have never beaten that one. This one I think is a bit easier, and also I am playing it just on the normal setting. Um, but it's been nice to start grinding for those achievements and just kind of get through pretty easily through the main campaign as long as I take the time to think things through. But yeah, there's such cool stuff. Like there's a mech I haven't unlocked yet that just has like an electric whip that hits multiple tiles. One that leaves smoke clouds that cancels attack, but then they also shock whoever's in the smoke cloud at the end of the turn. Ones that shoot fire, ones that shoot a laser that pierces across the whole map. But then you have to worry about friendly fire, so it's really fun. I don't think this was as big of a hit as FTL, but they definitely like got their formula down and put it into a completely different game that still feels like at its heart like FTL. So I'm a big fan. It's a good game.
Nice. Yeah, cool. Because I feel like sometimes those turn-based combats, like they're either good or they're bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's good that it's a nice one.
I think it is pretty easy. So like hardcore strategy, people might not like it, but for me, just like chilling, it's super good.
All right, nice, man.
Yeah, well, with that, I think we should get into our special topic today. What do you think, Ben?
Let's do it.
All right. So we are talking about some pretty cool stuff today. The history pre 1980, basically, of Sega. A big name that we know is going to be beloved and have some incredible video games, but basically that's done nothing yet in our timeline. So I'm just going to go over sort of the history leading up to where we are now, and it might give you an idea of why they haven't done anything, really. And then Ben will talk about the things that they have done in a little bit. So to start off, Sega actually got its origins from 3 American businessmen that I already thought was weird because I always thought of Sega as like a solely Japanese company. And these guys were Irving and Martin Bromberg and James Humpert. And the Brombergs were involved in selling vending machines in like the New York area in the 1930s. So they already had a business going with that. And then in the 1940s, these 3 guys came together to establish Standard Games, the company, and later either a subsidiary of it, or they changed the name, I wasn't too sure on this, to Service Games, which was a company that was aimed at selling slot machines and jukeboxes and sort of electromechanical stuff to members of the American military, basically. And so they set up a specific subsidiary in Honolulu, Hawaii during, I think, World War II. And in 1952, there was a law that came out from the US that banned the transport of slot machines between states, I think. I guess that was one of their big service models, or in some way it affected how they were selling, basically. So they decided, okay, we got to expand and tap on a different market. So they created Service Games of Japan. And if you think about Service Games, the first 2 letters of both of those words are SEGA. So that's where they end up getting the name Sega from. Which is funny because Service Games just sounds so bland and boring. But of course, like Sega just holds all this weight now. And the name Sega actually first appeared as an abbreviation on a Diamond Star slot machine, which was just one of their products in 1954. So then jumping ahead to 1960, Service Games of Japan, their subsidiary, was dissolved due to, I think, legal issues or something weird. But basically, the founders of Service Games created 2 new companies that were made to basically purchase up its assets. One of them was Nihon Goraku Busan, which eventually merged with the other company that was created in this deal and acquired another company created by a member of the American military named David Rosen, Rosen Enterprises, which he had created in Japan and was primarily a coin-op game importer. And he was making a lot of money off of this. So when he was in talks with the new company, Nihon Goraku Busan, they decided to merge and eventually formed Sega Enterprises Limited, the first time that we're seeing Sega as an actual name of this company in 1965. At that point, they thought Rosen Enterprises was doing so well that they made David Rosen the CEO of Sega. And just a little side note, one of the lead engineers from Rosen Enterprises, a guy named Hisashi Suzuki, created several of the video games and electromechanical machines in the early history of Sega, and he actually stayed with the company until 2014 when he retired, and he had previously been the chairman of Sega.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy that he's just... I think there were a couple others. His was the name that stuck out to me. But he's been around since like the beginning, before Sega was Sega. And so moving on, the company started out when it was now newly established as Sega Enterprises, mainly just producing jukeboxes, because that's sort of the business that these two companies were already in, and other coin-op games, but it started pivoting more to coin-op games after it made the game Periscope, which was really successful. So then in 1969, Sega gets acquired by this big media company, which I haven't actually heard of, called Gulf and Western, but apparently they were big at the time. And this company owned Paramount, the movie production company. So it gave Sega the ability to make games based off of Paramount properties down the line. And during this time, a lot of its profits weren't so much made through making its own games as it was through imports of other companies' games and products to Japan. So it still did a lot of the import and not so much of its own creation at this point in 1969. And then getting closer to where we're actually at in this timeline, in 1974, Sega Enterprises Incorporated, instead of Limited, was created, and it was in America. So Sega just stopped being a Japanese company and became an American company, and the Japanese office became a subsidiary, which is a little bit strange. And next time we talk about the history, I will try to explain the complicated way that eventually Sega Enterprises Incorporated disappears and Sega Enterprises Limited becomes like the Sega. It's very confusing. I don't want to get too much into it. But next interesting thing that happened in this timeline is that the current Sega logo was established in 1976. So that very recognizable blue and white logo has been around since all the way back in 76. And as Sega started to transition in video games in the late 70s, they realized how profitable it was. They partnered with Gremlin so they could access the American market. We've seen a couple things that they've worked together on. And eventually, later in 1978, they are going to buy out Gremlin, and those two companies will merge. And during this time, even though we haven't seen too many games from them yet, Sega's doing really financially well. I think a lot of it based on electromechanical games and coin-ops, but it's going to start to be due to video games as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that basically covers how Sega got started all the way up to where we are now, at least the big bullet points. And do you want to tell us some of the games that they came out with, Ben?
Oh yeah, definitely. Before I do, I just want to say probably the most interesting thing to me, just because I've been doing research, for 79 and even for 78, is that I didn't know Nihon Busan was Sega, because there are some games under that name. I'm not sure if we've covered any yet. Maybe there's been a Space Invaders clone, but yeah, they haven't completely gotten rid of that yet, so which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. But as you mentioned, their first really big hit as far as gaming goes was Periscope, and it was like a big hit, but it was electromechanical, so we didn't cover it, and we didn't talk about it on our timeline. But getting into the first real video games, starting in 1973, they came out with Pongtron, Pongtron 2, and Hockey TV, which to come out in 73 means that they were right on the edge of that wave, coming in pretty early, because Pong came out in really late 72. So they were, among the first companies to do that. And then continuing in 74, they came out with mini hockey and table hockey, and then also Goal Kick. These are also Pong games. But they also came out with a game called Balloon Gun, which was a light gun game. So they're kind of getting into that light gun market, which, along with Nintendo, seems to be kind of a popular thing in Japan. I'm not quite sure if that's always the case 100% of the time, but it seems to correlate with those two companies. But then getting into 75, they start cloning some other cooler games, maybe, like a race they came out with, which is a clone of Clean Sweep by Ramtech. They also came out with Last Inning in Table Baseball in March of 75, which was kind of maybe an electromechanical game, But it was a baseball game though. But maybe copied from Ramtex Baseball, but maybe just unique as well. But then in late '75, they came out with Bullet Mark, which was another light gun game. This time featuring 2 Tommy guns, which was probably cool.
Oh yeah.
But then in '76, that's when they really start like pumping out the games. And ever since '76, they've been among like the highest amount of video games coming out, almost as high as Atari, if not equally high. But the thing is, almost all of these games have either been lost to time or are not emulated. So we just never really review them or take an in-depth look at them. They're almost always honorable mentions. I think one of the reasons that we have so much information about them, though, even though they're kind of lost, is probably because of Sega Retro. I just want to give a quick shout out to that website. It's basically a Wikipedia for just Sega games and just old ones. It has a lot of great info, including a lot of Japanese flyers, which is where we get a lot of our information. But in '76, they come out with Road Race, which was kind of a mix between a speed race, Taito Speed Race, and an Atari Highway type game. They also came out with Sparkling Corner, which was a 4-player racing game. They came out with Motocross and Man TT. That was, I think, the first game that we've actually covered. So I think if you go back through our podcast, you can hear us talking about Motocross, but it was kind of like a sort of behind the head isometric racing kind of game.
Right.
It was kind of okay. It wasn't like the best. But they came out with that. They came out with Rock and Bark, which was another light gun game. Squadron, which was a clone of Jet Fighter by Atari. Heavyweight Champ, which actually did look really cool, but the game seems to be lost. We only have a couple pictures, but it was like a 2D fighting game reminiscent of Mortal Kombat or something. So that one sounds really cool. Then they came out with Tracer, which I did review, and it was my worst game of the year that year because it was a black and white light gun game. They came out with the Fonz, which I think we reviewed. It was basically very similar to Motocross and Man TT. And finally, to round out '76, they came out with Tic Tac Quiz, which was a game where they would ask you a trivia question, and then if you got it right, you would get to go on a tic-tac-toe game. If you got it wrong, the computer got to go. So it was a weird tic-tac-toe trivia hybrid game.
Right.
But it sounded okay. But I'm going to leave it there. I feel like that's already a lot of games. So we'll have another segment, maybe in '79. We'll cover like '77, '78, '79 or something like that. But yeah, they're really pumping out the games. There's a lot of clones. There's not too many unique ones, as you mentioned. I'd say probably the highlights are their Motocross series. And like Heavyweight Champ sounded really cool, but we don't have that much info on it, to be honest. But yeah, it's interesting that they have so many and we don't know about so many. So at the same time.
Yeah. And I'm sure the reason they're able to pump so many out is because they have so many other businesses really that they've been doing up until this point. But hopefully once they start to get more global recognition, we'll be able to find more stuff because it's such a well-documented company. I mean, if there's information out there, we should be able to find it.
Yeah, I think actually this merger with Gremlin, I think is going to help with that a lot. So, because their games are pretty well documented as well, and there's a lot of really great creative people at Gremlin. So I think the two companies together, it just sounds like a bunch of creative people and a company with a lot of money coming together. It seems like it should be a good fit.
Sounds perfect.
All right, with that though, let's head into the timeline because we are going to talk about some other Sega games today.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back from that brief break. why don't we get straight into some of the great games we got to talk about today? Start off with some honorable mentions. First, we're going to touch on a couple games from Cursor Magazine. This is the first time we're taking a look at Cursor Magazine that has anything we really want to talk about. But as far as we know, it's mainly Commodore PET games. So the first one that we want to mention is a game called Brick by Codeworks and Glenn Fisher, which basically there's like this brick flying towards a window and you have to stop it before the window breaks. Some weird sort of like timing based math game. It's very strange.
I think for part of that, the brick like becomes invisible for a while. Like it's real weird. But moving on, we also have another one here from the Cursor Magazine called Shark. And in this one, you're trying to eat people while avoiding traps and divers. So it's kind of like a chase game where you're trying to like, Pac-Man eat up some blops while being chased by people. So kind of like a Pac-Man game, but more open and not as good in any way. I did check it out. I found an emulator that could run this one, but the game is like super laggy and there's no sound. And I thought, let's just not bash it with a bunch of 1 ratings. We'll just honorable mention it.
Probably for the best. And then so next, moving on from Cursor Magazine, we have Games Volume 1 and 2 by Microage and Enigmas 1 and 2 by B. Erickson, which both came out in 1978, and both are books of basic games that we've only seen ads for, but probably a lot of the basic games we already know.
Mm-hmm. And then we're going to move on to some more TRS-80 games here. The first one's called Road Rally, and it's actually by Scott Adams. I don't think we've seen his adventure series yet, but he's going to be a really important person in the text adventure genre. But he starts out here with Road Rally, and it's an all turn-based, text-based racing game. So it seems terrible. Turn-based racing, not really what I want. So it seems like it's more of a math game where you're inputting desired speeds in 10-second intervals, which, again, doesn't seem that fun.
Gotcha.
And then we also have Space Trek 2. Seems like it's another version of the 71 Star Trek for the TRS-80, but it does have slightly improved functions and different possible outcomes, but it's still turn-based and it has very few sprites and, moving images. So still kind of a very simplified version of Star Trek, not like the Xerox Alta one we played last time.
Right. And then next up, we have some Commodore PET games to mention. So the first one is Sinners, which is just a Commodore PET version of the Mac Oglesby Classic. And then after that, we have Schuffspell, probably not how you say it, which is a sliding puzzle game that we think is Dutch, but some sort of sliding puzzle type game.
Mm-hmm. We then have The Vanishing Maze by Jim Butterfield, which is a maze game where you watch the maze being generated, but then it becomes invisible and you have to try to navigate through the maze based off of what you remember.
Ooh.
Which sounds hard, but walls do appear if you hit them. Like if you try to like move somewhere and there's a wall there. So you won't get stuck, but I do think you lose points every time you hit a wall. So it could be an okay maze game, but it is just go through the maze. We also have a game called Zone X, where there are 2 invisible lines on a grid, and then you have to guess where they intersect based upon clues given to you if you're wrong. So kind of like a graphical number guessing game. So it's a little bit better than just straight up number guessing, but
a very little bit. And to wrap up our first batch of honorable mentions, we have the Level 2 Basic Reference Manual, which included some games in it. This was by Radio Shack. It had Spaceship Lander, which was basically Lunar Lander, Ready Aim Fire, which was just a simple shooting game, and then Target Practice, which may have been some sort of like text-based, mathematical, maybe, shooting game.
Mm-hmm. And then we're going to move into the main attraction for the day, guys. It's the Bally Astrocade games.
Ooh, yeah.
Just to kind of, hopefully you guys remember, but in case you don't, basically all of these games don't have release dates as far as what month they came out. So I knew the games that came with the console, so we did those last time, and then I tried to basically just split like the remaining games in half. So we did half already, and then this is the second half. This is all the games that are going to come out in 78. So this is the final ones. And there's only 4 of them here, but we did review 3 of them. So jumping into it, I've reviewed Panzer Attack and Red Baron. It was 2 games in 1 cartridge here, which was pretty cool. So the 2 games, Panzer Attack is basically like a tank game, which I'll describe. And then Red Baron is like a side view biplane type shooting game where both players are biplanes, and it's a side view of you're flying around doing loop-de-loops trying to shoot each other. So those are the 2 games, and just like most of the Bally Astrocade games, they look really good and they play pretty good as well. Although there is no variations, it's just what the games are or what you get, which is probably the one big downside to the Astrocade, especially with Panzer Attack, that's basically like Combat for the Atari 2600. So Combat was probably like one of the best cartridges on the 2600. So it is a kind of a tall tale to see if this one matches up to it. But while it fails in some respects, I think it does do certain things better. So let me talk about that. I'll start with Red Baron because I think that's the more boring of the 2 games. Essentially what you're looking at here, it's very reminiscent of the biplane games we've played before. You have a ground, green ground at the bottom. You have a mainly blue sky, 2 clouds in which your plane actually goes behind them. So your plane will be kind of hidden if you're behind the clouds. And then there's 1 building just in the middle, just for, I don't know why it's there, just make it so that you have something to collide with and die that way, I guess. Weirdly enough, you can't actually kill yourself by going into the ground because like there's ground at the bottom of the sky at the top. You can't like loop around the screen vertically, so your plane will just like hit an invisible boundary and start going sideways at the top, but it won't crash either. So it's a little strange, but basically, yeah, there's 2 players, 2-player only, no AI, which is very disappointing. And it's something I think we've seen with the other Astrocade games as well. I was remembering, was it the shooting gallery game or like the outlaw game where there was no single player? Maybe I'm confusing with the 2600 one, but yeah, it's kind of annoying that there's no AI here. Right. But it's just 2 planes going at it. You do have, I think it's just accelerate, decelerate, and then kind of pitch up, pitch down. So to turn around, you actually have to fly upside down for a while, which is kind of weird. So like loop-de-loops and stuff are very much part of this game, flying upside down. So I guess that's kind of cool. The sprites of the planes look pretty decent. You can definitely tell they're older biplane type games, and the 2 sprites do look slightly different for player 1 and player 2. So it'll be a little harder to get those mixed up, although they are both red. But all in all, it's a pretty simple, 2 players attacking each other type game. But now let me talk about Panzer Attack. This one is the more interesting and more fun of the 2 games. And that's because I think it solves an issue that we've had with tank games for a long time. And that's that when someone gets hit, historically, they kind of just sit there and they can get spam hit right, forever until they move. But on this game, whenever somebody gets hit, it kind of really quickly resets both players to the starting position again. And, whoever got that hit won that round, which actually does make a big difference, especially because this game can go up to 4 players. So in a 4-player game, it's kind of like 4 tanks in, and then every time one person gets destroyed, they're out of the round and now it's 3 tanks, and then somebody else gets destroyed, now it's 2 tanks. So it has this kind of like last man standing feel that I really like. I don't know, I think it just kind of solves some of the problems with tank. And on top of that small gameplay change, it also graphically looks really good. There's something about the shooting in this one specifically that it just looks really fluid. I don't know if the frame rate's just really high or if it's just the graphical fidelity of the console, but I don't know. The bullets look really nice and they fly out really nicely. And the tanks, have 16-way directional aiming. You do control them like tanks, so it's just turning and then only a forward. There's no backward. So it's kind of hard to turn. You basically have to like turn sideways and then forward. I don't know if that makes sense. But
Right. Like to where you're the barrel's facing, right?
right. Like if you turn right or left, you're not gonna like start moving right or left. It'll
Right.
just turn, like pivot you, and then it's forward to go forward. So maybe I said that a little weird, but it's tank controls, which do take some time to get used to, but I think, they work for a tank game, obviously. And the other thing I really like about this is that each of the players, the tanks are colored slightly differently, so you can tell who everybody is. But then also at the top, you have a score marker, and it has the picture of each player's tank right beside their score. So it's really easy to quickly glance up and know who has what score, and I really like that. Both of these games, you put in at the beginning how long you want to play them. I think for Red Baron, it's a time like 2 minutes that you can put in or whatever. For Panzer Attack, it's the number of rounds you put in. So you get to kind of control how long the games are. But yeah, that's the basics of them. So let me get into my ratings because I quite enjoyed this. There's not really bad games here, which is good. Let's start out with maybe the weakest score. That was sound. You do have a constant engine hum, which is super important, I think, in these games. And if it doesn't have it, it just feels not good. So for both games, it has an engine hum. For the Panzer game, I think it's the same engine hum as Red Baron, but it's just pitched down for tanks, which is fine. You also have the same shooting sound in both games, which is a perfectly fine shooting sound, but it would be nice to maybe to do something like if the tank one was like a little bit bassier or something like that. And then in Red Baron, you have an explosion sound that's like a beep, kind of like a pong noise beep, which is a little annoying at times. For the tank or the Panzer Attack game, it's kind of just like another boomy explosion-y sound, so it's a little different in that respect between the games. But I'd say overall the sound effects are kind of what I expected. Wasn't anything extra, wasn't anything special, so I just left it at a 2.25 out of 10 there. For gameplay, I went a little high here. I gave it a 3.5 out of 10. That's mainly because of Panzer Attack. I think that game in particular, it's the best 4-player version of Tank on a home console to date. I don't think the 2600 could do 4-player on that game mode. So I just like the King of the Hill Last Stand kind of gameplay of it, and I think it'd be super fun with 4 players, really. 2 players is just kind of okay. But honestly, the 2600 is probably better because it can do all the variations like the shooting off of walls and stuff that this can't do. But I really like the 4-player part of that. And then Red Baron is just okay. It's kind of like almost a tacked on mode in my opinion. But you do get both for 1 cartridge, so I can't like knock it for that. So I gave the gameplay a 3.5 out of 10. I think that the Panzer Attack game is worth a cartridge for sure. So, and keep in mind the Astrocade hasn't had a tank game for it yet, so it's kind of necessary for the library of this game. And I think they did a pretty good job. And then for graphics, I also gave that a 3.25 out of 10. It's very colorful. I love the colors on the Astrocade. It's all in true color, all the games, and the fidelity of all the sprites are really good. The Panzers, they look a little cartoony, where like the barrel of the tank is like too long. And in all the 16 directions, like some of the diagonals don't look very good, but if you're just like straight north, south, east, west, it looks really good, I think. And it plays really fluidly. All these games do. I think the one part about the graphics that did disappoint me is that you've got this blue sky for Red Baron that's just asking to have a fade, or just some bands of different colored blues that we usually see. I'm almost sure the Astrocade could do that. I think they deliberately went for a pure blue sky for an aesthetic reason. But I would have preferred it if it was different colored blues in there. So that's probably my only complaint. But all in all, it looks really good, plays really good. I like the scoring, like how it displays like either the tank or the plane by your score, so you know who has what. All the tanks and planes do look distinctly different, so you could tell who is who when you're playing. So all that's really good. And just in general, the Astrocade looks good, and the resolution is quite good, especially compared to the 2600. And then finally, for relevance, I gave it a 6.5 out of 10. It is the first kind of tank and playing games on the Astrocade, so it's kind of important there, but I don't think it's nearly as relevant as combat was. And I don't know, I think it's just somewhat relevant. So overall, I gave it a 3 out of 10. It's a very good playable game on the Astrocade. It does not disappoint. It didn't, like, I don't know. I feel like they could have just put out some kind of trash games
right
in the middle of 78 here, but I don't think they did that. There's always things that they could have improved on, but I think it's a very good tank game, especially. And then Red Baron is just okay. But I like tank. I would have wished that it had more like maps, for instance. You just have one map with a couple barriers in there, but it's totally workable. And again, if you're playing with 4 players especially, it is a great party tank game that you're not going to have on any other system, so it's worth having just for that.
Very cool. Yeah, it definitely seems like Astrocade's unique take on that genre. They're still doing their own stuff with it, even though basically this whole console at this point is like arcade games on a console, but that's also what makes it impressive. So
I should mention, I don't think Midway made either of these games on an arcade machine. I think these are unique to the Astrocade, although they're definitely just copies of Combat for the 2600.
Right.
And like Biplane, which I think was by Fun Games.
Yeah, and there might have been one called Ace as well.
Oh yeah,
Ace. Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, they're 2 very competent games. So why don't we move on to your one that you did, Wes? Because this one I am excited for.
Yes, yeah, and I'm excited to talk about it. Next cartridge that I got to take a look at was Brickyard and Clowns, which of course is a Breakout and Circus cartridge. So just a little background on the cartridge itself. I love the box art for this cartridge.
Really?
Just because it's so strange. Like, with one of these things where like you have Brickyard and Clowns, those don't really make sense together. Gameplay wise, it makes sense why they're on the same cartridge, but theming wise, it doesn't. So you would think they'd have like a picture of a brick wall and a picture of some clowns, right?
That's what mine was, kind of. It was like divided in the middle. Here's Panzer Tech, here's Red Baron.
Which makes sense, but not for the Brickyard Clowns cartridge. They decided to put clowns with like their legs, arms, and heads just popping out of a pile of bricks. So it's just a bunch of clowns sitting on a pile of bricks, and that's the whole thing. And it's very strange, and I love it. But other than that, Brickyard is a breakout style game. Clowns is a circus style game. As far as I know, there was a Midway Clowns arcade cabinet, but I don't think Brickyard was ever a Midway game. It was just them. This is them copying other breakout games, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But to go over the gameplay for this, Brickyard is pretty similar to basically every breakout game. You're bouncing a ball off a paddle to clear all the bricks off the screen, and this does have the feature where a new screen of bricks appears as soon as you clear them all off. The biggest difference this one has probably is that the ball has simulated gravity, so it's almost like a pinball Pong game where the ball slowly arcs and falls back towards the paddle instead of the normal like Pong gravity just bouncing all over the screen. It also seems to move slower if it's hit in the middle of the paddle, and faster if you hit it with the edges of the paddle. That's what one of the people who was playing this game explained it as, and it makes sense, but it seems like there could also be some other variables for what affects the speed. But if you do just like bounce it off the center, you could just get it to never go up to the bricks. So there's pretty big variation in the speed based on how you hit it. The rows are also laid out slightly differently. There's 2 rows of green bricks and then 2 rows of empty space, and then 3 rows of the next colors of bricks, blue, red, and then another blue. Green is 3 points, red and blue are 5 points. Not too important, but normally how these breakout games work. You could also set the amount of players for this. You can go up to 4 players, and you can set the amount of lives per player, which can go up to 99 if you want an incredibly long breakout game for some reason. And also, apparently, you could set it to 0 as well, and it would just game over you as soon as you started the game. So I don't know why they didn't code that out of there, but it's pretty funny it's still in. But something to note for the 4-player version of this, I thought it was going to be like all paddles on screen, which would have been nuts, but it is turn taking, which is all right. It's nice to have that option, and it's not like one person does all their lives. It's like after you lose 1 life, it goes to the next person, which for this kind of game, I think that turn taking works really well. And similar to the games you were talking about, it does display by color, I think, of each player, or it changes color to show the current player's score, but the scores are always up there, so you know how everyone else did in their rounds. There's difficulty settings that determine the paddle size, but other than that, there's no variation with Brickyard, the big weak spot of the Astrocade as far as me and Ben are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
So then let me talk about the gameplay for Clowns. Clowns is, of course, very similar to Circus and other Circus clones. In this, you get to set the number of players and the number of clowns, which I thought meant like there could be 50 clowns on screen, but that's just their way of saying like lives, basically. So same as Brickyard. And the players also work the same way in this. You can do 1 through 4, but it's just turn taking. And when you get down to it, Circus is basically Breakout. It's just a seesaw and moving balloons. So you can imagine that the turn taking and 4 players is pretty similar to what it was in Brickyard. The clown also does have gravity, but it has weird gravity and how it ricochets off of balloons. I'd seen multiple times, and it happened when I played it as well, where sometimes you'll hit a row of balloons coming from a sort of horizontal or close to horizontal angle, and your clown will just bounce horizontally and pop the whole line of balloons. Like they just never arc down, which I'm sure is how it's supposed to go. You're kind of like bouncing on the balloons, and they wanted it to be different than Brickyard, but it is a little weird. The balloons also slowly move across the screen like other circus games we've seen, and when you clear a line, a new line appears. So for this one, you don't have to clear the whole screen to get a new screen to appear. It's just line by line, and it keeps going forever until you run out of lives, as far as I know. There's 3 different colors for different scores of the balloons, which makes sense. But then I want to talk about the ratings that'll let me describe a little bit more about these games. For graphics, I gave it a 2.75 out of 10. For whatever reason, these do not have the same visual impact as the original 4 games I reviewed for the Astrocade. They have similar colors. They have the bright reds, greens, blue, yellow, and white. But Brickyard, it's just, breakout games aren't going to be the most impressive to look at, especially when we're past the age of just color being impressive, but we also want to see cool sprites. I mean, this is Breakout done wonderfully, but even Breakout done wonderfully is just a bunch of rectangles. So it looks pretty good for Breakout, just not visually impressive. Clowns does have a decent bit going for it visually. The stick figure clowns wiggle their arms and move their legs when they're in the air, just like the original Circus. The seesaw looks all right and bounces back and forth depending on which clown gets launched. The balloons are round-ish and have a white spot in the middle, you know, that classic cartoon like shine on an apple in the balloon. And they do like wiggle slightly up and down as they move, which I really like because it makes you, even though there's these blocky circles, you definitely feel like they're balloons.
Maybe you should like explain how the seesaw works in case people miss the circus episode.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point. So the seesaw and clowns, kind of the one of the main differentiator from Breakout itself is that the idea is the clowns are basically launching each other into the air to pop these balloons. So you have to catch the clown on the empty side of the seesaw, which is up. When he lands there, it'll shoot the clown on the other side of the seesaw up into the air. So you're always alternating back and forth where you catch the clown and where the clown is launched from, basically. So it's basically just like a big breakout paddle, but it has a little bit more variance to it. So that's just the basic idea of how the seesaw works for clowns. But getting back into the graphics, between the two games, there isn't a lot of visual variety. So even though each one looks pretty good, they don't look that different in their color scheme, especially because it's kind of like one color for the paddle or the clowns, different colors for the bars or the balloons, and then the background's pretty much the same between both of them. So it wasn't that it did anything bad. It still looks good. It's also really impressive that the clowns are moving, and we're talking about a console and not an arcade cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
And it does run really smoothly, but it just wasn't super impressive visually. So then for sounds, I gave it a 3 out of 10. Again, they're a little bit of a letdown. There's a lot of musical tunes in Brickyard. Like, whenever you lose a ball, there's must be at least 3 different things that play, and they're all just for you losing a ball. But I'm pretty sure they're all from previous games. There's the charge tune, which doesn't play you when you win. It plays when you lose a ball, which is a little like that sound is always associated with victory, so it's a little bit weird. But I just felt like we'd seen them all before. It still, of course, is impressive that we are seeing music in a console, but it just felt like we heard it, or I'd heard it at least in the previous games that I played. The sounds themselves for the gameplay are just alright. There's pong beeps for the paddle in Brickyard. There's a slightly different balloon popping sound, which I think is supposed to be the bricks smashing. And then in Clowns, there's a nice sort of like pong beep trill for the seesaw to make it sound sort of like the cartoon stereotypical spring noise. And then there's also a nice hollow popping sound for the balloons, which I think works really well. They very obviously brought that popping sound over to Brickyard, and it doesn't make as much sense there, but it does work really well for Clowns. And so even though I don't think any of these sounds are great, it is still a lot of sound for a console in 78. So I do think it does deserve a little bit of recognition for that. And then for gameplay, I gave it a 2.7 out of 10, or 2.75, sorry. I did that again, but compared to some of the previous cartridges we've seen for these two, I just feel like there isn't enough gameplay variety. I am coming from rating 4 games at once when I previously rated the Astrocade, so maybe I'm a little bit spoiled. But it just didn't seem like these two games were that different enough from each other, really. The difficulty and lives are nice settings, but the only other option for gameplay variation is the amount of players. And since in neither of these you're playing with more than one player simultaneously, it's not really a gameplay variation, it's just taking turns. That being said, I do think it's pretty cool that you can set up like a 5-life game, and even though it's not Smash, it makes me think of Smash, like 5 stock. Mm-hmm. And, taking turns to see who can get the highest score. I think that's a nice competitive aspect and works really well with the home console. And I do also think the gravity in Brickyard is a cool change, but I don't know if it's like the best change. It's an interesting feature, but it's not like, oh, this made Breakout 10 times better. So there's definitely some good stuff here, but the gameplay overall was just a little bit lackluster for me. So then for relevance, I gave it a 5 out of 10. It's another few neat games for the Astrocade. They're getting Breakout on there, which is essential. They're getting Clowns on there, which of course tons of people have been cloning, but they're still both clones of previous games. It is the first time we're seeing that seesaw and wiggling arms clown action on a console, so it is pretty impressive for doing that. So then overall, that left me with a 2.75 out of 10. The Astrocade is a great system, but I don't necessarily feel like these two games made like the most of what it can do. Fairly simple graphics and gameplay, but thanks to the system, they did both run incredibly smoothly. The sounds are also really impressive, but I just would like a little bit more variety from what we've already seen on the Astrocade before.
Yeah, I feel like that one maybe it was like a little cursed because the actual concept of the game itself was maybe a little outdated. Just because Breakout came out 2 years ago, right? So we've seen it a bunch of times.
And I do feel like it's an essential. Like, it makes sense that they have Breakout on there. But when it's so similar to Clowns, it almost feels like they could have done Clowns and something different, and it would have been a little bit better. But,
yeah, I could see that for sure.
Yeah, overall, great games, but I wanted to be realistic that they weren't they aren't the best things that we've seen on the Astrocade.
Yeah, maybe we should move into that though, Wes.
Oh, yeah.
Before we do, though, a quick honorable mention here. The one card that we didn't review is called Letter Match, Spell and Score, and Crosswords, and it's versions of Concentration, kind of like a Scrabble type game, and an unscramble and make a word kind of game. So I don't know. They're weird word games.
Yeah.
So maybe some of them did have cool sound and music like effects, but we're not that interested in that. So let's move on to football. This is the last cartridge that they released this year for the Bally Astrocade. And I had just a roller coaster of emotions playing and rating this.
Oh, man. Do tell.
Yeah, so originally, I remember looking at football in my original research and thinking, whoa, this looks incredible. And then, like a week ago, I was kind of divvying out the games between Wes and I thought that basically you pick a play and then you just watch the characters move and perform it. And so it was kind of like an RNG based game where you just picked plays and then watched a cutscene essentially. And I was like, oh, that doesn't sound very fun. And then earlier today, I actually went and played it myself. And I was like, oh no, I can actually control the characters. This game's amazing. So yeah, this is the first true football game ever made. In my opinion, it plays just like Blitz, just like Madden. I mean, it is so reminiscent of modern day football, and we haven't seen that at all yet. The closest we've ever gotten has been baseball, which is fairly similar to how baseball games are played today, but never football. And this is the first true one. And that is just insane to me. I feel like what maybe they did was they saw the Mattel football handheld and kind of did that, but added moving sprites and picking the plays. All in all, it's just an incredible game, like incredibly good. So let me talk a little bit about the gameplay, how it works. First of all, before you even play the game, it plays just the ending of the national anthem to get you in the mood.
Oh, nice.
Which I think is great. But then it's a 2-player or 4-player game. I didn't get the 4-player game running. So the manual says players 1 and 2 control the movement of the quarterbacks. So I don't know if there's 2 quarterbacks in a 4-player game or how that works. But I'm just going to talk about the 2-player game because I know that one. But essentially at the beginning, you're presented with this play screen. So basically there's maybe like 10 different plays in the playbook, which already, the fact that it has a playbook is already reminiscent of modern games. But this surprised me so much. Basically, it picks 5 of those plays at a time, and then it'll cycle through them, number 1, number 2, number 3, 4, and 5, and you are going to click with your controller over which play you want, and it'll still go through all 5, so your opponent doesn't know which play you picked.
Oh, interesting.
Which is incredible.
Yeah. So you can actually play 2-player on the same screen with somebody.
Yes, and you can pick plays and they won't know what you picked, which is just awesome. You have running plays and passing plays, and then you get actually into the game, and it's kind of like I guess it's like a side view or maybe a top-down view, but you've got these sprites that are very small, but they all move and have animation. You've got a quarterback and then 5 linemen for both offense and defense linemen. You've got 2 wide receivers, and then there's, I guess, one like linebacker who's kind of watching the quarterback on the defense side. So altogether, it's 16 sprites, which I think is half of like a real football game. No, I think it's pretty close. Yeah, I think there's only maybe like 2 or 3 people missing per side. So there's a lot of sprites here, and you snap the ball. So nothing happens until you press something on the controller, and then your quarterback will snap the ball and kind of go back, and you can actually see him hold up the ball, which in this case is just a blue rectangle, but it works. And then the wide receivers will run their route, and basically the quarterback fires the ball kind of like how you would shoot a gun in gunfight or something. So you can kind of aim it like, I think it's 3-directional aiming maybe. And then you just have to, it's actually really, really fun to play because you have to aim it in such a way where it's going to intersect with your wide receiver. And oftentimes I think it's the easiest just to wait and for those wide receivers to kind of do the crossing route that goes through the middle of the screen, and then you just do a straight on shot and just time it so that the shot gets to them right when they're in the middle of the screen. But when you get it, it's actually really satisfying, and it is somewhat hard too. So there's definitely a skill curve here. And then while all this is going on, the actual cornerbacks, which are basically the people that cover the wide receivers, they're both controlled by the second player. Unfortunately, the emulation I was playing doesn't let me play second player. And that also meant whenever the second player's turn was to pick a play, basically I got frozen out of the emulation at that point. So I never got to play defense, so I don't really know how it works, but I know you can rush with them. So if you want to just try to rush the quarterback down, you can do that. Maybe actually you play as, they say cornerbacks in the manual, but it would make a lot more sense if you played as the single linebacker, and then you could double a wide receiver or rush the quarterback if you wanted.
Right.
But you can get interceptions, you can do a punt, there's touchdowns and safeties in the game. The actual field has markers every 10 yards, and because I guess of the resolution, it basically does, I think, 50 yards at a time. So basically if you do a Hail Mary or something and the guy catches it way at the end and then crosses the boundary, it'll like load in the next 50 yards and you keep running. So it's a little weird that way, but it works totally fine. And it keeps track of the downs, the score, all that stuff. So it's really cool. And it is basically like a real football game. And I think in every respect, I think even the action of the linemen, because your quarterback can kind of get rushed down if they, wait in the backfield too long by the opposing linemen. So I think even that is similar to like what happens in a game today. I mean, it's very realistic, and everything is kind of moving, and all the feet of the guys are moving. It's really good to look at. As I mentioned, you have the national anthem in the beginning. You also have the charge theme that plays pretty constant. It might just be random. It might just be, I don't know, on third downs. I don't know. But it happens pretty often. And then you also, whenever somebody catches the ball after a pass, you hear, I guess, crowd noise, but it's kind of like, I mean, it's bad crowd noise because, the consoles at this time can't do great crowd noise, so it's almost like static. So it's a little annoying, but it works. I'm not like upset about it. And when you get to the touchdown, it says touchdown across the whole screen, which is really satisfying. But all in all, it's just a really good football game. That's like modern. I mean, that's how a modern football game is, and we've never seen that. And for it to come out, like, if this came out on an arcade machine, I'd be impressed. But they came out on a console, and it's like all these things are happening, and it's in true color too. Like, you have a green field with an outline that's in white for the out of bounds, and the two teams are different colors, blue and yellow. Around the out of bounds is just a blue kind of background that everything's on. It's really good looking. So Yeah, I love this game. So let me just start with the gameplay score. I gave it a 4.5 out of 10. I could play this game for hours. Like, it's that reminiscent of modern football games that this is one, even though there's no variations, you don't need any variations. You just need a second player, and you could play this game for hours and hours and hours. Because of the play calling and the fact that there's a playbook at all, you always, like, every scenario, depending on if it's first down, third down, 20 yards, 10 yards to go, you're going to be picking different plays, and that's going to be fun. And I even tested the passing and the running plays, and I thought both were viable, which there are games that come out today which don't feel like that.
Right, can't do any running plays.
I know, so I was pretty impressed with that. So I just love the gameplay of this a lot. For graphics, I gave it a 3.5 out of 10. It's not like the most amazing graphics, but you have to imagine all these characters here are stick figures that do have animation. You know, they're very simple, but they are totally workable. And the throwing of the football feels really good as well, and looks good just when it kind of flies across the screen. It's a dark blue over green, so it's really easy to see where it's at, and it just looks really good. So yeah, I really like the graphics. The only thing I would probably say that I didn't like is just when that screen refreshes if you go more than 50 yards on a play, which does happen a lot because it seems like all of the characters have the same speed. So if your guy just is a little bit ahead of the defensive guy, he's going to go the whole way. So that's a little weird, but it's fine. For sound, I gave it a 3.25 out of 10. I just like the music. Obviously, any music is going to be good for me, but I love the national anthem of the charge. The crowd cheering is a little annoying, but it does make the moments where you get that really big passing play like feel good, and it'll continue to cheer until the play's over. So if you're running like 50 yards, they're going to be cheering for you the whole way.
Nice, that's awesome.
Which is kind of nice. It is quiet with no sounds when the actual play is going on until somebody catches the ball or you cross the line, and it becomes a running play at that point, the line of scrimmage. So you could argue that that's kind of a weakness, and it is a weakness, but the thing is that it's so hectic and there's so much going on and you're so invested in the gameplay that you really it doesn't matter. So all in all, I think the sound effects just serve to amplify the game, which is already good. And for relevance, I give it an 8 out of 10. I wish I could go higher because I love this game, and I think it's the founding game of all football games ever made, in my opinion. But it seems like it's kind of unknown. And that bothers me because I was having kind of a hard time finding a lot of information on this game. There are a lot of videos, and it is on emulator on archive.org, so you can go and play it for free anytime. But I think it's just a combination of the fact that the Astrocade in itself wasn't as popular as like the 2600, for instance. And also maybe it's just an early cartridge that not a lot of people got. I don't know, but it doesn't seem like it was a very good seller, which is super surprising because it's so good. So innovation on one hand, and then also not very popular on the other hand, I think. And so overall, I gave it a 3.75 out of 10. I love this game. I think you guys can tell. If I had another person to play it with me, I could easily play an entire game of this and have a great time the whole way through. So that says a lot. And it is totally modern football. At every game that's a football game that comes after this, I'm not saying they're all like taking from this game, because people could come up with football by themselves too, but this is like the first game that's really football that we've ever seen. So I love it for that. And there's so many little details like picking the plays and having that be a secret that they just did right. That's what we see in games today too. So many great things. So I love football.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you were the one to take a look at it. I think I would have recognized that it was monumental, but I do not like sports games nearly as much, so it wouldn't have gotten the praise that it deserves. But I mean, we made it, right? Like they're actually playing football.
Yeah.
That's
Now we
awesome.
just need basketball.
Yes, that's true. And that might take a while longer, but who knows? I'm sure somebody will come up with it.
I don't think it'll take that long, to be honest. I think only another year, maybe.
Nice, nice. Well, we have that to look forward to, but for now we have football sitting in the back of our mind, and we know that Astrocade's on top of it. Bally's making some real sports games here.
And I also want to say that one is also really unique to me because it's not based on anything else. It's not based on a Midway game. It's not based on any arcade game that came before it.
Right.
I do think it was maybe influenced by the Mattel handhelds, but still, it's the fact that they're just coming out with these unique titles that are like arcade level quality on this console is crazy. Absolutely crazy.
It's nuts. Yeah. Happy to see it. Excited we're finally getting these, and makes us even more excited for what we have coming from the Astrocade next year. But that does wrap up everything we have for the Astrocade for 1978. So let's move on to our last few honorable mentions and the last game that I took a look at today. So next, for an honorable mention, we have Secret Base by Sega, which comes out in August of 78. Looks like some sort of bombing run type game that also had the possibility of you getting shot down. Did have the nice hand-painted background, which we love to see. And apparently it made craters when destroying an enemy base, but it's probably just like the base gets removed and then there's an empty space there. Either way, it sounds interesting, but not too much that we know about it other than that. And then next up, we have the second game that I reviewed, Super Road Champions and Super Road Champions 1, which were just two different versions of the same game, by Model Racing. So this is a 1 or 2 player version sequel to Road Champions, which Chris, our guest star reviewer, talked about a while ago. But one of the big things about this is that it's in color. And this is an arcade cabinet, I should mention, since we've been doing console games for a little bit now. But just some background about the cabinet itself. It's got a pretty cool outline on the sides of the screen. Just looks like stands and a crowd and grass from like a typical Formula One style racetrack. There were 1 player and 2 player versions of this cabinet sold. They had the wheels and the pedal on the front of them, but you could also play just 1 player on the double cabinet. So it was more of just if they wanted to sell the smaller 1 player version. There are people holding trophies and checker flags on the side of it, so typical racing kind of art. And this, oddly enough, was featured for quite a while in a music video to a 1980 song called Holiday by Nazareth, which Ben found, and it's hilarious. It's just like this sort of classic, I don't know if you would call it like grunge rock or just classic rock kind of feel. Not grunge, I guess, because it's the 80s. And they're just jamming out, and this one guy is playing Super Road Champions in the background. So it's pretty sweet. But getting into the gameplay for this, same as the original Road Champions, but I'll just describe it again so you guys know what that style is like. It's a speed race style game, but it has almost what I would call like a chase cam view. It's not like straight top down, because the whole screen has sort of a perspective, like a very top of the screen vanishing point. So it's all sort of tapered. The road is thinner at the top and gets wider as it goes down to the bottom of the screen, but it gives you the feel that you're sort of not right on top of the car, but behind it a little bit. So it's got that going for it. It reminds me a lot of the, I forget if it was called Air Raid or what the game with the bombing game with the crazy graphics that I played a while ago was, but sort of like that looping thing, but not as drastic of a perspective on this. But for the game itself, you're basically getting as far as you can in the time limit while dodging oncoming cars that you're passing. There is extended play at both 400 and 800 kilometers, so you can keep playing if you hit those marks. And it looks like once you hit the 400 kilometer extended play, it goes from 2 to 3 opposing cars that spawn at a time. So I'm guessing when you hit 800 kilometers, something else might happen as well, but none of the people in the videos that we had for this made it that far. You crash if you hit another car or if you hit the sides of the track. There's also some wet patches on the track that make you lose control and spin out and hit the walls. And you also slip a little bit if you're going too fast around corners. So a lot of stuff that we've seen in tons of racing games. It's pretty similar. And you can also shift through gears to maximize your speed. But I think for this, not too sure. It seems like you shift by the degrees that you push the pedal down. There may have also been a shifter by the steering wheel, but I'm not too sure. So it might have had a slightly different way of shifting. But getting into my ratings for this, you might not guessed it by the way that I just described this game, but the graphics are like weirdly incredible on this arcade cabinet. So maybe I was just excited after coming from a console game, but I gave it a 4 out of 10 for graphics. It looks
Nice.
so unexpectedly good. It's true color. You got red, you have yellow, you have green, you have purple, you have teals, and a bunch of other colors for all the opposing cars. If you're playing 2-player, I think it's a red and a blue car, and the opposing cars are usually green, orange, and purple, I think. The cars themselves are really detailed. You can easily tell that it's a Formula One car. There's a clear spoiler at the back of the car. There's lines for treads on the tires. The tires themselves are white and they have gray lines that actually move a little bit as the car moves forward, so it looks like the wheels are turning. There's the big, like, thin section and then sort of hammerhead shark style nose that are in the classic Formula One cars, and all super easy to make out, very clear. It's not like when you're looking at some of these and saying, like, that's a block, but I can see how that's a tank. It's like, no, this is actually just a Formula One car, just right there. You can see all the details to it. And then also there's some white coloring and designs that make it pretty clear where the driver in the seat is too. So that looks really good. And that's all usually about 5 cars on screen. This does the sort of thing where the opposing cars that you have to dodge will come like one and then the other one and then the other one. They go to the bottom of the screen and then they loop around to the top again. Although they do move around pretty dynamically. The perspective, though, is also just super cool on this. It's weird in the way that when cars are coming from the top of the screen, they look like warped and stretched until they show up all the way on the road. So when they're halfway on the screen, they look a little weird. But the way that the screen is has the perspective does give you the impression of speed when you're like really rocketing up the screen and your car's getting smaller because it's further up the track. So I thought that looked really good. It's definitely a weird take. Like, I don't know if it's the best way to portray it, but I like that it's different. The wet patch, for whatever reason, is just a big teal rectangle. I don't know why they didn't put more attention to that, but it is a really nice teal. I gotta say, it's like this nice refreshing color. And also the road itself, the track is really detailed. There's dots down the center, I think yellow lines on the side, and then there's white lights or markers on one side and red markers on the other side. So that looks good. And then there's green grass on the outside of the track. And also just some little additions that make it look even better. The cars slightly turn when you move them, like highway, except they're not rectangles. And there's a trophy that shows up on the screen that shows up in the color of whichever players wins when the race is over. And also your car just kind of like keeps driving off into the sunset when the race is over, which reminds me of like a lot of racing games where after you finish like a Mario Kart, and it just follows all the other players around.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, I just wasn't expecting, but it looks great. Getting into the sounds, I gave it a 3 out of 10. The engine sounds are pretty standard by now. Same engine drone that we've heard, but still good. And of course, good that it's in this game. The tire squeals are absolutely nuts in this. They're incredibly squeaky and weird, which makes me think they're probably not digital. It sounds like there's a component like actually in the cabinet making this noise. But either way, even though they're super squeaky and weird, they do work fine with the game. They don't play too much, just when you're going around corners and when you're on the wet patches of the track. A big plus for me is that it has this little 8-bit sounding song that plays. It's another classic that I can't remember the name of. You'll know when you hear it, but it plays whenever you get an extended play, which is pretty nice. And also, when you finish the race, there's actually a pretty good sounding cheer. Still a little bit like static, but probably not as bad as it sounded on the Astrocade. So I really like that as well. And then for the gameplay, this is where it's just, another speed race game. I gave it a 2.5 out of 10. It looks like a perfectly fun speed race game, but it doesn't really do much different other than the weird visual aspects. It does give a really nice feeling of speed, which we always love to see in these games. But once you're at the top of the screen, you're basically just like slightly slowing down and dodging the cars as they come on, and there's not too much difficulty to it. It does still get challenging because the whole game itself is really fast, so it's easy to just mess up and then have to go back to have to start over from zero again, or from neutral. That's not the good phrase. Start over from being stopped again. But it doesn't feel like there's much variation, and you can probably figure out the patterns pretty quickly. For relevance, I gave it a 4 out of 10 because it's super visually impressive, and it's very exciting that they're doing this weird perspective thing for this genre. But this game doesn't seem popular at all. And Model Racing, we don't see tons of stuff from them either. I think partly it might just not be that popular in the US, but still, it just doesn't seem all that relevant. So then overall, that left me with a 3.25 out of 10. Another one of these games that I'd love to see, where I look at the title and I'm like, what the heck is this? I mean, I can't expect it to be that good. And it's really good. The graphics, of course, are what make this, or what are the most exciting feature of this. But really, despite a few flaws, the sound and gameplay back up those graphics and make just a all-around really solid arcade cabinet. So that is Super Road Champions by Model Racing. It's Speed Race, but it's got a brand new look, and it's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say it has the best looking street that we've ever seen, I think.
It really does. And it feels weird to say it, but when you see it compared to other stuff, you're like, wow, that's like actually a nice looking road that they're driving on.
Have we not seen roads that had the dot down the middle, the lines? I feel like maybe we haven't.
I want to say we've seen it in some all black and white games, like maybe some dashes down the center, but definitely not the different colored markers on the outside of the track that this one did.
Yeah, that's a cool feature.
And this actually had like thick, like white dashes in the middle, so it actually looked like a real road as opposed to just like the little stick lines that I think we may have seen before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's cool. I like doing model racing games. I think they're a company out of Italy, I want to say, maybe. That's why we don't see them too much.
I was thinking Italy or Germany. We'll have to look that up for next time.
But either way, it is cool to see these, what I'm assuming are probably passion project games from these other developers. So, yeah, this one, it's interesting. I wonder, is it going to be games like this that influence like pole position, or is it going to be the more traditional speed race style? Because the camera it's definitely different from speed race, and I don't know which one's going to take off really.
Yeah, it's not quite at that pole position like directly behind the car, but
right.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this sticks around, because it looked really cool, but it definitely is a weird way to portray a racing game.
Yeah, I feel like Taito just has the monopoly on Speed Race, where they're the people everyone's looking to make that style of game.
Right.
And then there are some companies that are doing this. I like how you called it action cam kind of
chase
viewpoint.
cam, yes.
Chase cam. I have seen other ones like this. Maybe even the Sega, like the Fonz game and stuff, have been kind of in that style, but they're just not as popular as the Taito ones.
Right.
All right, but cool. We got 2 more honorable mentions, and then we will wrap it up for today, guys. We got Wall Block here from Taito that released in August of 1978. We are in August now, which is nice. We didn't really have much info on it, though. With a name like that, I'm kind of assuming it's a Breakout clone.
And similarly, we have Zigzag Block by Sega, also coming out in August. Another Breakout clone, we're pretty sure, but also we don't have much information on this one either.
Yeah, so another in the long list of Sega games that we don't have much info on.
Hopefully soon to change.
Yep. And that'll do it for us today, guys. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. The history of Sega was oddly fascinating.
Yes, yeah.
I thought. And man, the Astrocade is really good.
Oh, yeah. They keep making great stuff for it.
I think it really confirmed in my mind, like if you compare football or even Brickyard and Clowns to the last one you did, Wes, what was that called again? Slot Racers?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just not the same from the 2600. So yeah. And I think it's gonna, well, I shouldn't say it's the best console 78 yet, because I think there's another 2 consoles that are coming out at the end of 78.
Okay.
Second gen. So, but as far as the 3 that we know now, I think it's definitely my favorite.
Yes, yeah, I'd agree with you on that for sure. But with that, make sure to check us out on Twitter for announcements on when our next episode is going up. Send us an email if you have any questions, and make sure to check out our website. We got a bunch of great information on the timeline there, information on publishers and all the games that we've covered from them so far, and we try to keep that updated as much as we can with new stuff for y'all.
Yeah, and I actually just added the next 10 pieces of music that I wrote for the podcast. You can go and look up what games they were from. So a lot of cool stuff, like the Hearthstone theme. You can see what episode I played that on, and just a bunch of other really good ones, stuff from Age Mythology. So go check that out in the music listing section.
And that's it for us today. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you all next time.
See you next time.